Piers Morgan has humiliated Jordan Peterson and really exposed him for lying to his audience. Jordan is a big supporter of Tommy Robinson and a week ago lied to all of his followers on Twitter, saying that Tommy is now rotting solitary in a UK jail because he exposed mass rapes in the UK. This is a lie. Tommy is in jail for contempt of court because he refused to stop lying and defaming a Syrian schoolboy who he repeatedly broadcasted to his millions of followers was a violent sex offender. If you want more details, I did a full review of the documentary that ultimately landed Tommy in jail. I'll leave a link in the description, but in the meantime, here is Jordan getting schooled.
Properly accountable. My problem with Robinson being the so-called hero of this is that many people in America, and I'm not saying you're one of them, I'm sure you now know a lot more about him perhaps than you did before, but Robinson is not in prison right now for anything to do with the gang rape scandal. He's in prison because of this movie he made, this documentary, as he put it, as a journalist, which I don't think he is. He's someone who made a film after he was convicted in a court by a judge of being seriously defamatory to a young Syrian refugee boy who he tried to make out was the villain of a bullying incident that went viral because there was a clip, when in fact he was the victim. The judge made it crystal clear in his very extensive ruling, which I read at length last night. It's many, many pages. It's extremely detailed. It includes his analysis of all the witness statements, what the school have told him, all the documentary evidence, everything. There's no doubt that the judge's conclusion is that the victim was the victim, that the boy who did the bullying in the video that went viral, Bailey, who was befriended by Tommy Robinson, that he was also a victim in many ways of the firestorm that erupted after this story went viral. He also made it clear that Bailey had not had a racial motivation that he could establish against a Syrian refugee, which had been the original narrative that went out there. So it was very educational, this judgment, in many ways. He get into the bottom of what had happened. But he also made clear that the 5 witnesses which Robinson brought to court to try and support his proposition that this Syrian refugee was the bad one of the two, that all of their evidence was lacking in credibility. In fact, he called it, he said some of them had clearly invented their testimony completely. And he was very scathing about the quality of the evidence of everyone that Robinson brought there. And in the end, he found Robinson guilty of defamation. He fined him £100,000 and I think £700,000 in legal costs. And he made it crystal clear to him, do not repeat these lies about this Syrian refugee boy, Jamal, again. And all that Robinson did was go away and repeat them to absolutely everyone, including in this film, to wide audiences. And they are ultimately lies, as proven in a very forensic and extensive court case held by a very eminent judge. So my problem with Robinson is that he's trying to portray himself as this great martyr who's been, had lawfare put against him by the British establishment to silence him, when in fact it was his refusal to be silenced and to repeat lies about this young Syrian refugee boy, which is why he's in prison. Secondly, my problem with him, Jordan, if I'm honest, is I don't know how many Americans or people in America who've been following this, because I see all the stuff on social media, they just don't seem to understand that Robinson's criminal record is highly extensive and very unpleasant. So, for 20 years, he's been breaking the law. He attacked an off-duty police officer. He led a hooligan group of football thugs in a brawl involving 100 people. He headbutted a man in Blackburn. He used a false passport to get round the fact he had criminal convictions in the UK to get into America and was caught. He perpetrated mortgage fraud, over £160,000. He was then found in contempt of court twice for turning up at court cases involving people who had been accused of committing these heinous crimes of grooming and raping these girls, nearly wrecking the trials because he was saying defamatory things in public outside the courtroom. And then we come to the refugee story, in which he's now back in prison again. And he was found guilty of stalking a journalist. and accusing her partner of being a paedophile. This is not a nice guy. This is a pretty repellent human being who also simultaneously has been right to bang on for many years about the scandal of the rape gangs. So, yes, he's complicated, but at the heart of it is somebody who I think also, just finally on the point of Robinson, 2 points I'd make. One, I think he's done this, he's monetized his hatred of Islam. It has warped, in my view, all his so-called journalism, activism, whatever he wants to call it, because it's always skewed against Muslims. It's never fair and balanced in any way. And I think that's what tipped him over the edge with this story of this boy at the school. And, on that, the bully, the alleged bully, was actually kicked out of the school before this ever got made public by the media. So they'd already had their own investigation, concluded he was guilty not just of that, but a litany of other similar offences. So he was thrown out. But I also think that Robinson, and this is a slightly more complicated and insidious thing about him, I think he's been deliberately amplified and promoted by the people who have most to lose from exposure, justified exposure, because if they can make Robinson the guy that is trying to expose them, he's so discredited, particularly in the UK, that people won't take it seriously. And that's one of the reasons why there hasn't been more action, is because the leading whistleblower is Tommy Robinson. So I see problems in all of this with him, but notwithstanding, as I said at the start, I do think he's been absolutely right that this has been a massive scandal which has shamed the country, and that it needs proper national inquiry to get to the bottom of it. So that's where I sit with Robinson.
Yeah, well, I've been following the rape gang scandal for, I would say, 15 years, but the primary source of information for me in Canada has been Tommy Robinson.
Did Jordan even acknowledge that he lied to his 5.8 million followers on Twitter? Of course not. He quickly changed the subject from what Tommy Robinson is really in jail for, and started going on for ages about grooming gangs, just ignoring the fact that he was just exposed for lying to and misleading his audience. Jordan, you owe your audience an apology for lying to them about why Tommy Robinson is in jail, and you owe the Syrian who Tommy Robinson defamed as a child an apology for directing your audience to watch the documentary where he was blatantly defamed.